Well, once upon a time, life was so much easier. Life revolved around the sun, and the people, they loved the light. They welcomed it every day with dancing and songs of joyous celebration every morning when the sun rose. But they were afraid of the dark. So every night when night came, they'd light a fire in their homes and they'd hide in their beds. They'd keep that fire burning and they would stay in their beds until the morning light. The people had just one wish, that the sun would never set. But it did every night. And every night when it was getting ready to set, they would sing songs of sadness, songs rejoicing in the daylight, but sad because the night had come and missing the sun. Well, so it was day in and day out. They would wake up and sing songs of joyful celebration of the light. And when the day was done, they would sing those sad songs and hide in their beds. Until one day, a woman was ready to give birth, and she labored very hard all day long. And just before dusk, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. And then a few minutes later, as the sun was setting, she gave birth to a boy. Well, the villagers had never had twins in their town before, so they were very excited about it. They looked at the girl and they felt immediately a warmth and a light coming from her. They immediately loved her. And they looked at the boy and they felt a little fearful. He seemed to bring a shadow, and the world seemed a little dimmer when he was around. Well, the people loved the girl because they reminded her of the sun and the light that they so loved. And the boy, well, they were afraid of him because he reminded them of the night and the darkness that they feared so. Well, the girl and the boy grew, and as they grew, it became obvious that they had special talents. The girl, she had the power to heal. She could heal cuts and bruises as a very small child. By the time she was 10, she could heal bones and serious illnesses. She could bring animals back to life. The people wondered about this. And as she was a teenager, she could simply walk through a field and raise her hands, and the crops would grow tall and full. The people knew that she was very different. And then she began to be able to make plants that had died come back to life, and animals that had died come back to life. And now the people really started to wonder. They wondered if she could bring people back to life. But they never asked, and she never told them. Well, the boy, he had the power to bring peace. Simply by touching someone, he could bring calm and quiet to their lives, and he would help them fall asleep. As he grew older, he could calm animals that were frightened. And then sometimes when people would be hurt or animals would be hurt, he would go first before his sister and bring peace and quiet and calm to the situation so that his sister could come and heal the hurt. By the time he was a teenager, he could calm the storms. He could quiet the wind and he could stop the rain. And the people wondered, could they quiet them? Could he quiet them permanently? But they never asked, and he never told them. Well, they loved the light and they continued to fear the dark. And they loved the girl and they were afraid of the boy, but they knew they came as a pair. And so they knew that in order to have the girl in their life, they had to tolerate the boy. And perhaps the fact that both of them were always there made their fear and their love a little more prevalent in their lives, because all they ever talked about. They talked about the light and the dark, the girl and the boy. Well, one day, one of them decided to ask the girl for a favor. They asked her if she would go up to the top of the highest hill and see if she could stop the sun so that it would no longer move across the sky. Well, then someone else asked her, and someone else asked her, and so she agreed to try. So she went up to the highest hill, put her arms up in the air, and asked the sun to stop. Well, because the sun moved so slowly, no one was certain if it had stopped or not, so they waited and watched. And after about an hour or so, they realized it hadn't moved at all. The sun had stopped in the sky. They were thrilled, so they sang their songs of joy and celebration. They were so happy, and if it was possible to love the girl even more, they did. Well, after a few days, They weren't so sure they loved it so much because they were getting tired and weary. They used to sleep with a small fire, but sleeping in full daylight was a little bit different. They tossed and turned, they had trouble falling asleep, they had trouble staying asleep. Well, then someone remembered that the boy had the power to put people asleep by simply touching them. So they asked him to come and help them fall asleep. Well, he tried, but his powers seemed to have disappeared. So they continued to be frustrated with the sun all the time and the inability to sleep and rest. So they went to the girl and they said, since you stopped the sun, perhaps you can start it again. So she said she would try. And she went up to the mountaintop and she held her arms up and she asked the sun to start moving again. But nothing happened. So they waited a while. Still nothing happened. So she asked again, and then a third time. And after a while, when she realized that the sun was not going to continue to move, she said to the people, I'm so sorry, but there's nothing else I can do. And they became angry and started to fight and argue because they were so exhausted and so tired. Finally, the little boy stood up and said, let me try. So he climbed up to the top of the hill, he held his arms up, and he asked the sun to move once again across the sky. And immediately it did. Within 5 minutes, the sun was setting, and within 10 minutes, it was completely dark. Well, the people were overwhelmed with fear. They had never been outside in the dark. They weren't prepared for this. They hadn't gotten their fires started in their homes, and they didn't know how they were going to get home. They had no light to guide them. So they started running home. And as you know, running around the park is pretty crazy. They were running into things and running into each other and tripping over each other. It was nuts. Well, soon they heard a boy sigh and gasp, look up! And everyone looked up. And in that dark blanket, they saw stars. They had never seen stars before because they had never been out in the dark before. They stood there in awe and amazement, watching the flickering of those stars. And one by one, they started to get tired. And their eyes had adjusted to the light, and so they were able to make it home. They got home and started their fire and crawled into their beds and woke at the first light. And they woke singing their songs again of joy and celebration of the light. And they went through the day so happy that they had that rhythm and balance of life back. When it came time for the sun to set, no one wanted to sing those sad songs. And so they sat there looking at each other, and the little boy who had showed them the stars began to sing a new song. He sang a song of peace and calm and beauty and stars. It was a gentle song, a soft song, and it was a song of thanksgiving for the light and the dark. And soon the people learned the song and they sang it with him, and that became their new sunset song. Well, the boy and the girl grew up. And as they grew, they became more and more beloved by the people. The people saw how much they needed each other. And they realized that just like the light and the dark, life was so much better when there was balance.